Good evening, everyone. I have 6 o'clock. I'd like to call to order the November 19th, 2024 Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. First order of business is to approve the agenda for this evening. Are there any staff changes that we should consider?
Changes.
So move. Support.
We have motion, we have support. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Is unanimous. Next on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from the 18 June 2024 Zoning Board of Appeals, subject to any changes. Are there any changes that of note?
Nope.
So move. Support.
We have a motion, we have support. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Thirdly on our agenda are public comments for anything that's not published on the agenda for a public hearing. So I would like to note that under 5B, we have an ordinance interpretation that we will be evaluating and acting on. If anybody from the public wishes to speak to that ordinance interpretation, now would be the appropriate time. Or any other comments that you would like to make for hearing none, we will close the public comments period and move on to the agenda items of note. First on our order of business, we have a variance request which will contain a public hearing, and I would like to have our secretary read the application.
That might be with Robin as well, or did you get it?
What's that?
Did you find the applicant info? Okay, thanks.
Applicant Phil Mustin Construction. Project address 3955 Butternut Drive Northeast. Permanent parcel number 411014476001. Size of site approximately 0.41 acres. Zoning office. Zoning ordinance sections. Table 3402C and Table 3402D. Action requested of the ZBA. The applicant is requesting 2 variances to remodel an existing home into an design office showroom for his construction business. The variances would permit a parking lot to be added to the site.
Thank you, Carl. Is someone present from the applicant, on the applicant's behalf, to speak to the issue? Please come to the podium, state your name, and plead the case. Thank you.
Good evening, Doug Stolzelberg, XL Engineering. Phil and Maida Mustin are also in the audience tonight. Yeah, Phil and Maida are intending to remodel this residential home into their office for their construction business. And they're going to remodel as well as add to the building slightly. So the building's going to stay in place. And the fact that we're trying to work around the existing building and the lot to start with is not that large. It's only 100 feet wide. We're not able to provide the required parking and maintain the required buffer yards. We have gone through the rezoning process. You mentioned it's zoned office, and that's brand new. We're here tonight for a variance, and then we're before the Planning Commission next week, Tuesday, for site plan approval. The variance that we're requesting is along the, I'm going to pretend the property's running straight north and south, which it doesn't. So just to make it a little easier, what we decided to do was push the parking this way, and we held like 2 feet off the property line here. And by doing that, we can get 9 parking spaces and maintain the 10-foot required buffer yard on this side. We thought that made sense because the neighbor to the west is Lake Michigan Dermatology, and they have a significant setback already to their parking lot. This is like 25 feet, nicely landscaped. And we just didn't think it made sense to provide more buffer than is already there. So we honored the 10-foot on this side, which is up against property yet to be developed. Don't know what's going to happen there, but we thought that made sense. So that's one of the variances. The other variance is in a north-south direction. With the building, we've only got a given distance here. And so we held 2 to 3 feet off from the building to the edge of the parking, so we don't have bumper overhang into the side of the building. And when we hold the required 20-foot parking space, 20-foot maneuvering aisle, it leaves us 1 foot along the property line. That's the second variance. Because we're adjacent or across the street from residential property, that is to be a type B buffer, which requires a 15-foot setback. So if we honor that, then we can't get any parking on the site. And so that's why we're asking for the second variance. Your zoning ordinance is very specific that even though the property across the street that we're providing the buffer for is on the other side of a 66-foot right-of-way, your ordinance is very specific that it's still required. But I would argue that there is 66 feet there, so there's a good distance from the property that it would be affected mostly if the variance is granted. This is a picture I'm going to pass around. That's looking at the side of the house right across the street. And you can see that there's some very heavy pine trees there. It is the garage side of the house. So the living space is on the south side or away from the side that's facing where the variance is requested. I think if that's all I wanted to say, and if you've got any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Thank you, Doug. With that, we will open the public hearing and address or receive any questions and comments from the public.
Okay?
This is a public hearing for the variance request for the variance cited by Mr. Stalzenberg for the variance on the west property and on the southerly property. Anybody wishing to make comment is welcome to come to the podium, state your name, address, and going once, going twice. We'll close the public hearing to that. Moving on. Elizabeth, was this your site plan or was this Peter's that would, for staff review?
This was mine.
You enlighten us and share your thoughts, please.
Sure. I'll keep it brief because I think Doug did a good job of giving you an overview. I do just want to note that this property and the properties neighboring this one are all master planned to be an office development. So it doesn't really make sense to have a residential home fronting Northland Drive anymore. It just doesn't. The only other option for the applicant to use this as kind of the master plan intends would be to tear down the structure, which staff feels is burdensome in this case, since the structure is in good condition and can be reused, which is the sustainable thing to do. So yeah, if you have any questions, let us know.
You. In order for the Zoning Board of Appeals to act, we need to evaluate 5 findings of fact to review the practical difficulties which you're citing. We'll converse amongst ourselves and see where our thoughts lie and act accordingly. Let's start from the left end of the radio dial. Mike, would you have any comments, questions, or concerns?
In general, no, I appreciate the concept of trying to make use between the lot and the structure and not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good here. I guess just one question regarding the first variance or the west 10-foot. Was any consideration, I guess question in general, was any consideration given to that last parking place, Plan West?
I'm sorry, which?
Hey, Mike, can you turn your microphone a little bit?
Sorry. Yeah, the last parking place, the parking extending out to 2 feet, any consideration to elimination of that last spot?
To eliminate that last spot to give more of a buffer.
Correct.
They are slightly underparked as it is for office. And for this particular office user, we don't see that being a problem. But in the future, any other office use that might go in there, they might be pretty short on parking. So yeah, our ordinance requires 10, and they're providing 9. So a further reduction might be okay, or it might not.
Okay. No, that was my only question. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Carl?
You answered one of my questions. Thanks, Mike. They're required to have 10 and they're proposing 9. Is that my understanding? Okay. That was one of my questions. Could we eliminate the one on the end and meet the, I'll call it the side yard requirement? And I'll go through my notes here. Correct me if I'm wrong, Elizabeth, the existing structure meets all the setback requirements as it exists today.
Yes.
However, I think it said in 2024, the township rezoned this to office. And the office, to make this structure usable as an office, needs parking. The parking requirement is 10, they're offering 9. But to meet that 9 requirements, they need a variance on the west side, east side, and on the south side. I had a little bit of a concern about the east side and was questioning, could we get rid of that one parking spot? That may not be the best solution. But if we did that, then the south variance is basically an asphalt ingress and egress for the parking structure. So people aren't going to realize that that's in a variance because it's just an asphalt driveway. My last question, and this could be to the applicant or to you, Elizabeth. When this was originally a house, where did it have a detached or a attached garage? And if so, where was it located? Do we know that?
Yeah, so the attached garage was located on the south side, where it says existing building on slab.
Okay.
That was the attached garage, and I think are you using that attached garage, or are you remodeling, you're using the garage?
I was just wondering where it was, how they were accessing that existing structure prior to it becoming an office zone. They came in here off Butternut and went in that way, so. Other than that, that answers all my questions.
Thank you, Carl. Robin?
I'd like to say thank you for choosing Plainfield to place your business. We appreciate that. As far as the variances go, this is a very small lot, the lot was rezoned to office. There's two vacant lots. Have they been sold yet next to it on the east? Or what would be the north, I guess? So making this an office zone kind of, makes the lot almost unusable because of its size and because of the requirements for parking and whatnot. I applaud, as an architect, I applaud reusing existing, and the design of the new is really well done. I think it's a great addition, especially next to the businesses that are going up on Northland right now next to you. And it's a good integration with the neighborhood. It's kind of like almost a mixed-use development on the edge of a neighborhood. We had a lot of comments last month or 2 months ago about the use of that driveway, and I think that this really minimizes any increase in road use for butternut, which I applaud. So I'm a little queasy about the front easement, and I understand that you're probably going to put asphalt there, which is probably acceptable. But I have no other questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Robin. Reuse of property that's outlived its development that is currently going on, and driving by it is always a good thing. The parking ordinance that the township has is not a divine entity to figure out how much may be or may not be used. The market will, and the business will determine that. It smells about right in that there'll be enough parking there for the employees and the customers that are trickling in and out. On the plus side, setting an office zone next to a commercial corridor and isolating a residential subdivision is good common practice to keep the similar uses, and while similar while different, harmonious within the confines of the development. And so we're tasked with evaluating the findings of fact in the evaluation of the unique features, whether or not the problem is self-created, unnecessarily burdensome, provide substantial justice, or could be more appropriately addressed with an ordinance amendment. Staff has provided comments for us on this and given us draft motions. Given that, I'll entertain a motion for the addressing of this variance request.
I'll read. I move to grant the following variances for the remodel and reuse of the existing home at 3955 Butternut Drive into an office. 1, a 9-foot variance from the required minimum 10-foot landscape buffer zone between office uses per table 3302C and 3402D. A 14-foot variance from the required minimum 15-foot landscape buffer zone between an office use and a residential use per tables 3402C and 3402D. Based upon the following findings of fact: the subject site has unique and substandard features for office property. 2, the conditions of the site and development circumstances are not self-created. 3, granting the variance would allow the owner reasonable use of the property for a permitted purpose. 4, the variance would provide substantial justice for to the property owner. 5, the nature of the request makes a tax amendment undesirable. 6, the proposed variance request is supported for those reasons set forth by the members of the Zoning Board of Appeals and members of the public as reflected in the entire record of this matter, including the meeting minutes.
We have a motion. Do we have
Support.
support? Thank you, Mike. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The variance is passed. Thank you. Moving on, our agenda, we are to item 5B, an ordinance interpretation. This is not inclusive of a public hearing. Is there an application to read to that effect, Carl, or do I just? Thank you. Could you read that, please?
Applicant Brian Thibodeau, did I say that right?
Not even close, but you're fine, sir. I'm good. It's
Rod-
Devo.
Tebow. Project address 5856 Saddlehorn Drive. Permanent parcel number 411022118009. Size of site approximately 0.286 acres. Zoning R1B residential. Interpretation of zoning ordinance sections. Section 2.02A, accessory building. Section 3.1E, home occupations. Section 3.16C, home occupations. Sections 3.16G, home occupations. Action requestions of the ZBA. The applicant is requesting multiple favorable interpretations of the zoning ordinance as they relate to his e-commerce home occupation.
Thank you, Carl. Mr. Tebow, welcome to the podium.
Well, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate your time. So my wife and I have a small e-commerce business in which I need interpretation between a e-commerce, first of all, and a retail business. If I may, I'd like to show you pictures. This is how my garage is arranged. And you can see I got one for each of you.
Thank you.
This is at my van. If you flip the page, this is looking back at my van. My wife is unable to work outside of the home simply for the fact we have multiple special needs children. So looking through the ordinances and looking at home occupations, we decided the e-commerce business was the best bet for us. So the notices I've received is that, number one, I have a neighbor that is saying I have a retail business. And if you read the definition from the 2003 December ordinances, a retail business is a commercial enterprise that provides goods and or services directly to the consumer, which are goods and are generally available for immediate purchase and removal from the premises. All of our sales are done off-site or online, and they're sold, bought, paid for. People have them come shipped. I may have somebody come pick up something from my house. So that is the first order. I don't know how to do this exactly, I apologize. All I can do is read through what I've been said I'm doing wrong against the ordinances and say, no, that's not what I'm doing wrong. And the first thing is I do not have a retail business. I have an e-commerce business. If I continue down through, if I look at section G of 3.16, prohibited home occupations, e-commerce businesses do not apply. There is nothing that says I cannot do that. Continuing through, all I can do is try to read through the letter I received, which is doesn't exactly point to a specific ordinance. I have to pick apart and say, okay, what's she trying to say? The second part of it is that I'm not allowed to have anything in my garage that is for sale or part of my business. My garage is attached, which if I look at, I apologize. Ordinance, accessory building definition, and I could read the whole thing, but it says where an accessory building is attached to a main building in a substantial manner by a wall or roof, such accessory building shall be considered part of the main building. And it says shall, which if you read the definitions, shall in section 2.20A, shall be considered a part, shall is always mandatory and not merely directory. So therefore, as I see this, anything I can do in my house as a home occupation, I can do in my garage. That's what that tells me as part of the ordinance. Lastly, I apologize, is that it says that I'm not allowed to sell any products that are not made on site. I do not make anything off-site and bring it to my residence to sell. Everything that I do is bought in bulk. I go through 100% of the contents of what I buy. I unpack it, I repack it, make sure everything's correct, and then it goes online for sale. As far as additional traffic, I went through all the receipts of everything we've sold. It is 1.96 cars per day that come to my house. Far less than UPS, FedEx, Amazon, UPS, United States Postal Service, all visit my neighborhood multiple times a day. I'm creating no additional traffic to the neighborhood, and all I'm simply asking is that my wife and I be allowed to continue our home occupation. Any questions?
There may be.
Please ask away.
Thank you. Have a seat. This is new ground for me and perhaps others on the Zoning Board of Appeal for ordinance interpretation.
Well, I apologize for having to bring this to you.
That's why we're here. We're just regular people, live in the township, much like yourself. You, however, have the ordinance, and in the interpretation of the ordinance, we are, in fact, making law. So we have to be careful and proceed accordingly. To that end, I would like to solicit staff comments to support how we got to this point and whatever counsel you have for us.
Just a little bit of background, as Brian mentioned, there was a code enforcement complaint. It was handled by Sue Thompson, our code enforcement officer. She sent out a letter, I believe, in May. There was a follow-up letter in September. She was going to, I believe, issue a citation. Brian submitted his application to the Zoning Board of Appeals, which stays any action on our part. And essentially what your decisions on this will dictate our actions moving forward here. So it could be all partial or limited. I'll kind of go through section by section here just to kind of keep it structured. Under the background information, when I went through just went through in the staff application, you'll see the applicant's request. As you note in there, we did need some more clarification from Brian, which I think he's done tonight at the meeting, a little bit more about his position on that in terms of tonight. And then on the next page there, I know we haven't done interpretations. I think I've done 3 of them in 20 years since we've been here, and usually they're single item issues. In this case, we got multiple. They can be maps and a number of other things, but in general, they're supposed to be specific to the item at hand. And then if, it doesn't specifically say it, if you guys do find that there's a problem with the ordinance, to let us know, and the planning commission may need to take it up in the future with amendments and that kind of thing. In regards to staff comments, Brian, and hopefully I caught everything, but Brian did mention retail, the definition of retail. We didn't go into it in great depth in the staff report because our position is we don't really care. It's what's the home occupation standards? He's doing a home occupation, whether it's retail or some other definition, we don't care as long as he meets the requirements of that home occupation. So we didn't really delve into that in great detail. The big one for us, and the next one is the accessory building definition. In 2006, when we did a huge update of the zoning ordinance, and even prior to that, in practice, we've always defined that garage as separate from the house. The reason for doing that is because we have detached accessory buildings and attached. It's the only way we can differentiate between a 6,000 square foot attached garage. How do I say it? It gets muddy. Okay, so the point of it is, if that's our tool, defining the use of the house as separate from the use of the accessory building or accessory structures. And that's the way we've defined it since I've been here and based our ordinance revisions on that for the last 2 decades. So our position is you know, it's very clear, the garage is an accessory use and it's not part of the main house, and the home occupation ordinance seems to also address that in our, from our perspective. So,
Sir, I'll ask you to, thank you.
yeah, and so I can understand where Brian has come to that position from just reading section 2.02, but there's an entire ordinance to go through here. So if you go to section 3.01, where we also address accessory buildings, accessory structures, and go through that, there's a whole bunch of logic in there framed within the ordinance in its entirety that supports our position in this. In regard to 33.16C, page back here for a second. All right. Clearly, sometimes the home occupations, you can have some incidental. So like I get in my car and I made some baked goods in the house and I'm delivering it to somebody, I sold it online, and there's some incidental use of the car, or I'm taking a good in and out or whatever. We understand there's some incidental stuff, but the use of the garage specifically for a business or warehousing or things like that is prohibited by the home occupation ordinance. That's our position on that one. And then moving on to 3.16E. We concur. We don't think that the applicant is making a product on site to sell off site. For us, it's a bit irrelevant. It's the fact that the product is being sold out of the garage. Whether he makes it in the house or it's made by somebody else. I know the home occupation already differentiated, but we're not gonna sit down and police that every second.
Excuse me.
And then, and I can go into that one in more detail in a bit if you need me to. Section 3.1G, the applicant states his business is not prohibited by this section. We don't really think it is. It's just how the current operations are being conducted. So if he can comply with our ordinance requirements, we're fine. You can continue to operate it. It really comes down to, from my basic position on it, is it really comes down to the use of the garage. I understand what he's saying about 2 cars per day. We recognize that. I don't think that's the main force of our enforcement action here. So, rather complicated endeavor here. We did write up at the end of this, if you do feel like you need more information later on, or you could postpone it. Unfortunately, for each one of these, it has to be a separate motion and finding of fact. You may have, we put the standard suggested one for the meeting record, but you may find additional items on there. If you do, please let us know. We'll add them to it and help you through the motions, and I'll leave it at that, and give me, if you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you. Well, we may be back. We'll
be back.
withhold further comment at this point. Robin, do you have any questions, observations, comments to share?
Sure. Thank you. If this operation was a woodworker and he was fabricating, making stuff in his wood shop in the basement and taking it to craft fairs and living it up, living the best life as a woodworker, and that was done inside the house in the basement, that would be okay, correct?
There are some standards set in the home occupation ordinance about how much of the house you can devote to the business, but yes.
And if that woodworker did not have the luxury of a basement or room in the basement for his wood shop, and he, as many woodworkers do, operated out of his garage, that would be crossing the ordinance line and he would not be able to.
Yeah, there's definite potential there. It's gonna be a case-by-case basis, but yes.
So my question, if I can ask one, is could you move that storage operation inside the house?
Well, I could, but I don't understand the reason for it. It says specifically in the ordinance by definition that shall, as being the word, is always mandatory and not directory. When you read the definition of an accessory building, where an accessory building is attached to the main building in a substantial manner by a wall or roof, such accessory building shall is the key word, be considered part of the main building. Therefore, if I can do it in the basement, I can do it in my garage.
Elsewhere in, and I don't want to get into an argument,
I'm not trying
but
to argue, sir. I'm just saying
elsewhere in the ordinance, it does make a differentiation between accessory structure and accessory use. In this case, this use applies in an accessory part of the property. So the garage itself, whether it's attached to the house or not attached to the house, it is still defined as an accessory structure. And in this case, it has an accessory use that the ordinance does not allow. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. And I think we understand that the definition is, we might need to make some adjustments to that definition in the future. But I do think that it's very, it's clear that it is an accessory building, right? It doesn't say the accessory building disappears because it's attached to the home. It's still defined as an accessory building, so.
Yeah. I think I think this simplifies it. The way it was written, it's attached for the purposes of dimensional standards, setbacks, location, things like that. For accessory, though, it's still defined as a use, which separates it from the principal use, which is the home. That's why that was written in such a manner.
So,
how would I know that based on just reading the definition?
well, I've been in ZBA for 3 years, and every day is a new day. And on the planning commission for a like amount of time, and every day is absolutely a new day there. So I have to say that this is a bit of a learning for me, but the issue of accessory use, accessory structure, it may be a little ham-handed here in this particular trying to understand it, but in my mind, being part of this group for some time, the meaning is clear. It is an accessory use, and this type of use in that accessory use is not allowed by the ordinance. But if what you were doing in the garage were placed in the home where occupations are allowed, then you'd be fine. And I would be all for, if you can possibly do that, I would be all for your business to continue, because I know how hard it is to get by.
This may also help. I did not put in a staff report because I didn't want to overcomplicate things, but we can do a home on a property. So if you're zoned R1 residential, you have a principal use, which is a single-family home, and you can go build that by right. You cannot go build a garage on a lot in the single-family zone districts. So by right, you have a principal use. Accessory uses is garages, decks, those types of things. You can't go and just build one on a lot in Plainfield Township and frankly in most communities. Maybe that helps a little differentiate it a little bit too, just in terms of framework of the hierarchy.
And I would completely comply to the fact that it is against the ordinances.
Okay.
That's not even a question.
I'll ask you to withhold questions, comments, unless there's specific issues that are asked of the commissioner at this point. Robin, you all set?
Thank you very much for your
Thank you. Carl?
Peter, you brought up a comment, and I go back, a while, on the planning commission, where this your comment was very specific. We had a request to build a garage on an adjacent parcel of property where a single-family residential lot was. They were both R1 zoning. He wanted to build a separate garage on a lot adjacent to his. We denied that request for that very reason, because we considered that to be an accessory building, and you couldn't build an accessory building on a lot by itself.
That's correct.
Okay. Question to the applicant. I'll try and be very specific. What kinds of items specifically do you purchase and sell?
Goods, i.e. clothing, maybe some small appliances. It varies all around, sir. I can't give you a very specific. I get some furniture that I put together and assemble in the garage and I sell. It varies around, sir. It really does, because it is liquidation merchandise that I'm buying.
Where do you get this, where do you get these items from?
I have 3 suppliers I go buy from GR Liquidations and Door. Up until recently when Mike passed away, NC Liquidations in Stanton. And then also Extreme Liquidations in Sparta.
So you go to these places, pick up items that were or are for sale, take them back to your home, make sure they're operational.
Tear the box apart 100%. I make sure everything is operational, and then I repack them in the original containers.
And in some instances, you put things together.
Yes, sir.
Okay. How often do you have people come to your home to pick stuff up? Once a day, once a week, once a month?
It all varies. It averaged out when I looked at it at 1.96 visits per day, and maybe 5 on one day. 0, 0, 0, 0, 4, 0, 3. It all. I can't give you an exact number.
So on average, you say you get 2 vehicles a day that come to your home?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's my questions for the moment. Now, I'll go back to what the request is. I've been in Plainfield Township going on 70 years. I've been on 2 planning commissions, 2 zoning board of appeals. And during that period, a garage, either attached or detached, has been considered to be an accessory building for as long as I know that to be the case. Now, the comment that in 2.02A, where it says an accessory building is attached to the main building by this, or this, is considered to be part of the main building. It is, but it's still considered to be an accessory to that building. It's not considered to be part of that building. That's my interpretation. That's the way I read the ordinance. To me, that's the way the ordinance has been for a long period of time. Because of that, the activities of this applicant in his garage, as stated in 3.16E, there shall be no sale of products or services except those that are produced, constructed, or assembled on the premises by such home occupant. It doesn't say anything about accessory buildings. It says by the home occupant, which is the dwelling of the single-family home, not the garage, not the accessory building. To me, this whole issue comes down to basically, is the garage considered to be an accessory building? And if it is, it has certain rules and regulations that are different than the single-family dwelling. In my opinion, in my years on this township, a garage is an accessory building and it's treated differently. And that's basically where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Carl. Mike?
Struggled with this a little bit. I understand the confusion on the accessory building definition in 2.02A, but in 3.01, it's pretty clear. I had to reach out to Elizabeth and Peter for the same clarification myself today as I was reviewing some of this information. So while I was playing out the hypothetical that Robin spoke to earlier, I kind of struggle with the idea that you could do this in your living room, but not in your garage. That said, the definition of the accessory building is pretty clear in 3.01. You know, I wonder where e-commerce is defined versus private transactions and where that line is. You know, I sold something out of my garage to a private party this year. That's not an uncommon occurrence throughout the township, I'm sure. So maybe it's a question of frequency or, you know, or the goods. But as you described the goods you're selling, sir, you know, I ticked off a lot of boxes up here that fell back under commercial business, where it feels like the intent of the provisions for things produced in the home are not commercial goods being resold, but rather something truly produced within the home. So that's some thinking out loud, I guess, of the things I'm considering here. I don't have any other specific questions.
Thank you, Mike. Boy, I feel like the smartest man alive. I came to find 3.01 all by myself. That's where it gives the definition for accessory buildings and sites that when, even despite the fact that it's an attached garage, it's an accessory structure, it's an accessory building. So my question to the staff is, there's 3 to 4 items that we were requested to act on. In the absence of an affirmation of any one of these, it kind of kills the whole issue at hand. Is that correct?
Double check real quick here.
Let me just keep yammering while Pete's checking my homework. My interpretation of the attached garage is that is an accessory structure. The ordinance prohibits business within accessory structures. Robin alluded to, if it's inside the home, doesn't apply to us. Our task is to read and interpret the rules we have, not the ones that we want to see. And so while your mission is noble, the side hustle is great, by virtue of business being conducted within the accessory structure, that's consistent with staff's interpretation and the notice of violation that you've received. What did you
I
find?
believe you are correct. If the accessory ruling is in fact an accessory use, then the other interpretations are moot.
Thank you. That's all I have. I don't want to just, as this is an interpretation of the ordinances, I'd welcome you to come to the podium and give closing arguments.
Sorry, my leg fell asleep. My only argument is simply that the definition of accessory building, as soon as it become attached, is part of the main building. I can get over that. If I move the storage to my basement, which I'm more than happy to do, may my business remain intact.
Provided that it's within the 25% area of the structure requirement, that would not fall under our purview, you meeting the standard.
Okay, so then the fine that I received, is that null and void at this point, or do I have to pay that? Because I can still argue the interpretation. I don't want to argue, I really do not. I just want my business to remain intact because it's my wife's business, and it's our way of supporting our children who are special needs. That's all I'm asking.
We can't speak to the fine. That comes from the legal department. We just are asked to interpret the ordinances here.
So I'll just ask one more time. If I move the storage to my basement, then my business remains intact?
Brian, tomorrow, stop into the office or give us a call. We could figure that issue out tomorrow. It's not the purview of the ZBA to address that.
I understand that, and I appreciate that. So I guess the main thing from the ZBA right now, move the storage to my basement, and my business remains intact.
They're limited just by the interpretation to what we asked tonight. That's an enforcement issue that I could sit down with you and Sue, and we can go through tomorrow.
As long as it's less than 25% of my 3,500 square feet, I don't have an issue? Is that the interpretation?
That's not what's on the agenda tonight. We'll sit down and go through it tomorrow.
Okay, I understand.
Peter, with that, are you recommending we
Table?
Table this?
any further discussion?
or do you want?
Oh, I think, the way I'm interpreting this is he just wants to know, verify if he's gonna be okay to move everything inside the house and meet that 25%. To me, that's outside of what we're discussing tonight.
Okay.
So I think you can make a motion on the interpretation
Okay,
tonight.
let's continue on the request at hand. And I was assuming that, are you all
I
arguing?
have nothing else to say, sir.
All right, thank you. Take it. ZBA members, any further discussion?
I guess my final comment is, and I'm trying to find the note here, if it's 3.16G or not. I'm not opposed to having an e-commerce job.
No, that's,
That's where this society is headed down the road. But saying that, that's just one part of this request. So
correct.
I'll start, if that's what you're looking for.
You may.
I hereby move to deny Mr. Tebow's interpretation of section 2.02A of the zoning ordinance that an attached garage is defined as part of the main building for the purpose of conducting a home occupation, and hereby, affirm the Community Development Department's interpretation based on the following findings of facts. 1, those reasons set forth by the members of the Zoning Board of Appeals and entire meeting record in this matter, if applicable. 2, if applicable, provide an additional finding and determination.
I think we should add that section 3.01 of the zoning ordinance addresses the issue specifically.
We have to do these separately, correct?
Yes, sir.
Second?
We have a motion, we have support. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Peter, do you want us to go through the rest of them?
I don't believe that you need to, based on your finding on the first item.
Very well. The ZBA has said that the garage, despite being attached to the principal residence, is an accessory structure. And so by virtue of that, business is not allowed to be conducted within the garage. Encourage you to get with staff and figure out what the art of possible includes to continue your business at home within the confines of the ordinance.
Peter, do we need to do anything regarding Susan's?
No, I'll talk to her tomorrow. She's in the office, and we'll go, schedule a time to meet with Brian and go through that. There's some other things in here based on tonight's meeting that have to be addressed with him, so.
I'll call it fine, is on hold at this time?
And that's on hold at this time until we've had a moment to discuss it.
Well, that brings us to item 6, staff comments. Staff, you've been very proactive in keeping us on track. What else is going on in our fair township that we should be apprised of?
Zoning ordinance amendments are coming up to implement the master plan. What else is going on? Anything you want to chat about?
We will have a fairly full agenda at the planning commission, Robin especially, coming up in November here. About 5 site plans, if I remember correctly.
We're gonna be busy.
Yeah.
We're gonna start in December, right?
Yes, we have, as you may be aware, we have a Coit Apartments project and then another project where Lambert Insurance used to be and Beckett's Barber Shop on Plainfield Avenue under the mixed-use, MXU zone district. So you're seeing some of that incentive-based TIF financing and Elizabeth is our guru on that, so kudos to her. You'll see some of that stuff coming forward in the next 6 months to a year, some of those projects moving forward, so there'll be some big changes that way. And that's pretty much it. We've got a lot of stuff going on in Parks and Rec.
May I address one more question, please? Is that, obviously, the way to my basement is through my garage. Am I allowed to stage?
That's an incidental passage as far as we would consider. You know, it's not, you wouldn't necessarily need to build a separate entrance into your home for the materials that you're moving in and out.
ZBA, our comments?
ZBA members,
Anything coming our way that you're aware of?
Not that I know of. Anything?
No, I think December will be a quiet month in general.
No other comments?
good to see you again, sir. Carl? Yes, thank you. Robin?
No other comments.
I have none. Give it that, we will adjourn at 6:58.